face. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out.
So me and the rest of my college classmates were like vultures at this networking event. We were hovering around the senior accountants at the top firms in the country, just waiting for a moment to swoop in and make some small talk. We all had interviews with these guys the next day, so we wanted to make a good impression. Because of course, if we made a good impression, we're more likely to get a job the next day. So, as I surveyed the room, waiting for my moment to swoop in, I realized everybody here has got white skin, a lot of hair gel, and a sports coat on. I forgot most of those things at home. I didn't want to stand out too much, so I tried to join a crowd, join their conversation, and here's what they were talking about. So what do you guys like to do outside of school? Me, I love going to the driving range. The driving range, I love the driving range. We should go sometime. I had no idea what a driving range was. I looked it up later. It has nothing to do with NASCAR. I obviously wasn't going to excel in that conversation, so I moved to a different crowd, tried to join their conversation. Here's what they were talking about. What was your favorite place to study abroad in? Mine was easily Paris. Oh, Paris was beautiful, but España takes the cake for me. Study abroad? Man, I could barely afford to study here. I definitely couldn't afford to study in España, so... But I didn't want to bum everyone else, so I moved to a different crowd, tried to join their conversation, but at that point, I just felt like a Roomba. Like one of those robotic vacuum cleaners. Like I would bump into a wall, pivot, bump into another wall, and pivot. Except instead of walls, there's just conversations that I didn't really give a shit about. And I did that for the rest of the night, and when I got home, I couldn't go to sleep. Because if tonight was any indication, these interviews tomorrow are going to be horrible. I mean, I had nothing in common with these guys. Their hobbies were like fishing and golfing and investing. My hobbies were like smoking weed, watching the Discovery Channel, and doing both of those things at the same time. I felt like there was a machine somewhere that was pumping out perfect replicas of the consummate accountant. These guys with their sports talk and their upper middle class pastimes. And if that was the model, then I felt like a defective product. And no one was gonna want a defective product. But I couldn't give up now. I mean, I spent the last 4 years studying accounting. I took out student loans for this. If I didn't get this job, then what was this all for? I couldn't give up now. So the next day, I had 4 interviews back to back, one each with a different company. And guys, I brought my A game. I prepped my small talk. I borrowed my roommate's hair gel. When it was time for the first interview, I walked in the room. There was a guy who's a little bit older than me. He had this very fit build, and he had this dark green lanyard on. And I recognized it, so I pointed at it. And I was like, hey, are you an Eagles fan? Heck yeah, bro, how about you? You know it. Nailed it. I sat down. I was feeling pretty good about that exchange, and he pulls out my resume. He looks at my name. He reads it. He goes, Jason Pangilinan. Pangilinan? Is that a Filipino last name? Yeah, it is. How'd you know? And guys, now I'm super excited because, as you heard from Amy, my last name's pretty hard to pronounce, and he got it right. And also, maybe he wants to talk about the Philippines. Maybe I remind him of someone he knows and loves. Maybe that's Filipino. My ex-girlfriend was Filipino. Never again. Guys, I had so many questions. Except it was an interview, so he also had a lot of questions. He would ask me, oh, Jason, looks like you worked at Panera Bread for 2 years. Why don't you tell me what that was like? It was good, but I'm thinking to myself, like, never again? What does he mean, never again? Filipinos never again? I don't like the sound of that. Oh, Jason, looks like you have pretty good grades. What was it like balancing work and school at the same time? It was good, but I'm thinking to myself, like, did he not like the food? I feel like that's a character flaw on his part. Jason, are you okay? It was good, but I'm thinking to myself, like, man, what did this girl do to him? He didn't really enjoy that conversation. He shook my hand. He told me it was nice to meet me. He was lying, because I walked out of the room with no job. But I didn't have time to stress out about it. I only had 5 minutes till my next interview, so I just took that time to reset, clear my mind. When it was time for the next interview, I walked in the room. There was an older lady sitting behind the desk. She had this impeccable posture, very intimidating, and these very deep frown lines. And when I looked at her desk, her phone was out, and on her phone, there was a picture of two little kids. And that's when I realized why she got those frown lines. She's a mom. Moms love me. This is going to be great. So I pointed at her phone, and I said, hey, are those your two little kids? They're very cute. How old are they? Oh, they're 5 and 7. I was 5 and 7 at one point. Why don't you tell me a little more about them? And she did so smiling. We went back and forth for a really long time. Turns out her kids also like the Discovery Channel. And she finally says, okay, Jason, I really enjoyed talking to you about my kids, but let's talk about you. So she takes out my resume. I finally feel like I'm getting another shot. She says, okay, Jason, looks like your work experience is good. Looks like you got good grades. What's this? It says you organized an event for over 200 attendees. That's really impressive. Why don't you tell me a little about that? Sure. So last summer, I organized a sex positivity seminar for the incoming freshmen at my school. I just wanted to make sure they knew how to have sex safely and responsibly. Excuse me? Oh, last summer, I organized a sex positivity seminar. I just think that's a little young, don't you think? Nah, well, they're 18. I feel like they're legal adults and make their own decisions. I just think that's highly inappropriate. Oh, okay. Do you want to talk about... I used to work at Panera Bread. She didn't want to talk about that. She shook my hand. She told me it was nice to meet me. She was lying, so I walked out of there with no job. Good grades, right? Good work experience. But no job. I mean, I didn't get it. I just wanted to get through one conversation and talk about the things that were on my resume. These things that, by the way, I've been working very hard for 4 years to develop. But instead, every conversation came back to how I was different. I was not like them. So you know what? I'm done with the small talk. I'm done trying to make people feel comfortable. I'm done being Jason Light. They're about to get Jason 110%. It was time for my third interview. I walked in that room. I shook the guy's hand. I said, hi, hello, how are you? And he said, how was the networking event last night? So I told him. It was weird. I don't get the fact that you're gonna gather a bunch of people in a room, have them talk about nothing that has to do with the job that you're trying to recruit for. What about their skills? What about their qualifications? It doesn't make any sense. Guys, that man took one look at me and he said, Jason, right? I completely agree. I felt the same way 5 years ago when I was in your shoes, and I feel the same way now. But hey, I know it's a really awkward process, but it's all part of it. So why don't you take a seat, relax. I feel like me and you are gonna get along just fine. And we did. Guys, we had a great conversation. He didn't say anything that I thought might be racist. I didn't tell him about that time I taught a bunch of kids how to fuck right. And he never said it was nice to meet me. He said, I look forward to working with you one day. Guys, I told you I had 4 interviews. I didn't go to the 4th one. I didn't have to. I got the job. I was one of them. I was an accountant. Thanks.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody